same storyboard. If there's parts I missed, please jump in and run. So the origin of Brother Francis Shelter is really this community. It's people in this community. So in the late 70s and early 80s, our economy was at a really terrible time, and there was an increase in the number of people that were sleeping outside. There were a lot of people sleeping outside. A lot of them were sleeping down by the railroad tracks, and the railroad pushed them all out. And there wasn't a place to be outside. The community was getting upset and frustrated. And Archbishop Hurley at the time noticed, and he had met these two brothers, Brother Bob and Brother Dave, in Washington State, and he invited them to come up. They're community organizers and religious leaders there, but they're real just young men, and they came up and they just started to get to know the people that were sleeping outside, get to know the people that were experiencing homelessness, and they helped to organize and work with them. And they tried a lot of different solutions. They tried to open a shelter, but the city didn't want a shelter, and there were some frustrations in between the two groups, and the fire marshals would come and make sure nobody was sleeping, and they'd come in surprise, and so everyone had to wake up and stand up, and it wasn't working out, and there were still a lot of people outside. And so together, Brother Bob and Brother Dave organized a sleep out, and all these people experiencing homelessness slept out on the park strip. They said, and to say, hey, we're here, we have nowhere else to go, this is a really hard place to be without shelter. And it made an impact. And all this time, I would say Archbishop Hurley is working with leaders in the municipality and in the city to hear this and see this. And there's a story that Mayor Tony Knowles at the time rode his bike one night through the park strip where all these people were sleeping. And the next day, reached out to Archbishop Hurley, and from that, Brother Francis Shelter was born. And Brother Francis Shelter began as a partnership, a public-private partnership between the municipality and the community through Catholic Social Services at the time, but through the community and the municipality. So at that time, the municipality gave the land on a leased at a very low cost, the land, and gave a building and then Catholic Social Services and the community provided the service inside the shelter. As a part of that, the municipality also paid for all the utilities. So it began as a public-private partnership, and in my research, one of the first public-private shelters in the country. So like Alaskan approach, right? That's how we do things in this new way. And then over time, the community has really provided the support for the services here at Brother Francis Shelter. There are donors that have been giving to this shelter for decades, since we started in 1983. And they are committed to that. And but things have changed. So in the early 90s, the municipality at that time decided that they would no longer provide utility services for Brother Francis Shelter. I wasn't there. I don't know exactly why the logic was, but from talking to former board members at that time, it sounds like there was a thought that why should we provide utilities for one nonprofit and not for another? So not seeing that what Brother Francis Shelter is providing is more than any other nonprofit. We are providing an emergency service that in most parts of the country the government is a part of providing. But a difference of opinion, and I don't know all the reasons that went into that. And then and Mark, you can tell me on the dates on this, at the late 90s, early 2000s, the building that we were in was condemned. It was very old. It was old when we got it. It was old. It was a warehouse. And so at that point, we needed a new building. And there, I don't know how many choices were looked at, but we are very grateful that Cook Inlet Housing stepped in to build a new building. So this building is owned by Cook Inlet Housing. Perhaps in another place, like I visited Austin, Texas, that shelter is built by the city. But here, Cook Inlet Housing stepped in as the community leader in this capacity, and we have an incredible partnership with Cook Inlet Housing, and they provide us with a lot of support in operating a facility like this, which is a challenging facility to offer. So that's sort of how we got to here. And then I gave these talking points a lot in the summer, so they're probably still boring to you, but I'll just tell you again that in terms of our overall budget, this shelter costs about $2.1 million to operate a year, and that does not include homeless family services. So that doesn't include the case management, the support services that we offer here. That's a different budget for us. If we were to add that in, that'd be another $500,000 at least, I would say. So of the budget that we have, 80% is provided by donors. Donors in this community have stepped forward to provide support for this shelter. That's a pretty awesome level of support. They're incredible. And I think it's a lot. It's a lot. It makes the idea of expanding to do a lot more sometimes challenging because donors already provide so much here. And so I think that's something to think about. The other portions of that are provided by state grants. So BHAP, we get money from BHAP for utilities, which is like how much is that, $100,000? $80,000?
Yeah, somewhere around
140, thanks, Robin. And we get,
for those of us who are still coming on board, basic homeless assistance program.
Thank you. Yes, basic homeless assistance program. That's the money that comes through HFC. It's a part of that budget, part of the budget. And then the Human Service Matching Grant. We're a recipient of that here and at Clare House. So that's the grant. It comes through the Department of Health at the state level, but it comes to the municipality, and there's a match by the municipality. And so we get $150,000 at Brother Francis Shelter for that, from that grant, and the same at Clare House. And that pretty much describes the budget. Is there any questions about that? Yeah.
My question is the $500,000 it costs for case management. You and I have talked about day shelter, which would be about, again, $500,000 for 110 to 150 individuals. Yeah. Are those two different things, or would that be the same thing?
No, that was a little different, and that was a guess, $500,000 for the case management here, because in that I would think about case management for respite, case management, other places where that are part of the homeless family services budget, which I would include in day shelter. So day shelter would include a level of navigation services, for sure. And in the budget that I gave, it included navigation services, it included frontline staff, and it included, lights and operations and water and stuff like that.
The definitions.
Oh yeah, so we should talk about the definitions. We tried to provide that in the. It's a really important point. Thanks, Stormy. So emergency shelter. This definition here, this is the definition from HUD. So emergency shelter is pretty basic. Emergency shelter, how HUD defines it, doesn't include supportive services. We at Catholic Social Services believe that they must go together. So in the models that we're looking at to the future, and the future that we want to create here in Anchorage, we want to create a future where we can transition adults and families to permanent stability. And so to do that, we need to have supportive services within shelter. But the definition of emergency shelter doesn't include that. And I think that historically, Brother Francis Shelter hasn't thought of itself, when it began as an emergency shelter. Just an emergency shelter. We've stepped into, as Catholic Social Services, creating a community where permanent stability is the goal for all the folks that we're seeing. That's the place that we're trying to build. So the Brother Francis Shelter that we dream of is one where all of the people that we touch through our shelter services are connected with case management and other supportive services to reach permanent stability. And we think of that, I keep saying that, but permanent stability for us is about permanent housing. It's about stable income, so that's either employment or connection with benefits that you might be eligible for, and then social and emotional well-being, that community connection. Because we all know that hard times are going to come for all of us. That's a part of our life. But what we don't want is for the people that we serve here, the next time something really challenging happens to them, that they come back to shelter, that they lose everything. And by connecting in the community, by having a network of support, by having social and emotional well-being, understanding the services that are available to them, they can avoid this. We can help to create a world where they can avoid this. And that's the tools that we want to give them to be permanently stable.
So we really want to do everything that we can to keep anybody from entering this facility. It sounds like an odd statement, but simply coming into this facility is traumatic and life-changing in a very significant way. So what's interesting is our goal is to make this shelter as small as possible because we're moving people into permanent stability. And I think I'd like to add on one statistic and kind of note the implications. 832 people last year through our case management got into a place of permanent stability. It was over 900, I think it was 970 something the prior year. Now stop and do the statistics on that. If we weren't a ladder out of homelessness, and we're only 240 places here, right? If we're not a ladder out of homelessness, picture what the problems in Anchorage would be. And our desire, of course, is that more and more investors will invest in those services that will get more and more people out of experiencing homelessness as quickly as possible. And it's hugely beneficial financially for the whole community to invest in these services. I mean, it's just a no-brainer, really.
Do you know if there's a return rate of folks? So do you, that one, and then the other one is average length of stay. I know that might have some considerable variables with it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm thinking back, Dave, Robin, to the information that Agnew Beck presented with the data that we gave them. Because I believe half of the people that stay here less than a week. And if you look at the presentation that Agnew Beck put together about the 3rd Avenue,
they're coming to the committee on
then you're going to
homelessness
see
next
that.
month. Okay,
you're going to
great.
see that
Okay.
breakdown and that's as close as we can get to an average length of stay. But one thing we've tried to do in the past is really look at those folks who are long stayers and try to focus on them and try to be connecting them to housing and services. I think there's, we did a project 2 years ago where we focused on them as a cohort and moved them into housing, and it was successful. It just takes funding support to be able to do that.
And actually, maybe the more refined question is once folks are on coordinated entry, how long are they here? Because I know you're trying to ladder them out, but sometimes it's the external things that are preventing folks from being able to go.
So I'm going to take off my CSS hat for a minute, and I'm going to put on my coalition hat. And I'm going to say that coordinated entry is a work in progress. And at this point, people have been on coordinated entry lists for a long time, too long. And I would say, I don't know the average length of stay, but I would say that it's a long time. And I would also say that the people that are coming into Brother Francis Shelter, it's only been in a relatively recent change that we put them into HMIS, but that hasn't in the past meant that they got onto the coordinated entry list, that housing list. Now, as a part of the new Built for Zero effort, which we are very involved with, Catholic Social Services, we know that the whole community has to be a part of the solution, and we want to work to be a part of it. we're a part of Built for Zero, and Built for Zero is changing the definition, so when you get into HMIS, you will be on the by name list. But that is not how it historically was. So there was a disconnect between getting an HMIS, like coming in the door at Brother Francis Shelter, and actually getting on the housing list. And we don't have enough staff here to just sit and put every single person on the coordinated entry list, because at that point it was quite a long process to get on. Does that make sense? If people have more questions, did I?
No, that was great. I was just going to say that I think the tricky part to answering that question is that it's a dynamic list. Mm-hmm. So you don't get a number and then you stay at that number, right? It's all based on vulnerabilities. So you could be at the top one day, and then depending on who's come on the list, you're going to move down.
Because I think you're trying to change the language to pools rather than a list.
Yeah.
But it's a static snapshot, correct? And then if your identification on that list, which pool you are in, is a static snapshot of a time and place, a time and day.
It is, but one of the things that we've learned in our housing programs is that the first thing we do when we get a referral is re-certify, go through the process again. Because a lot of times, because it's based on a tool called the VI SPDAT, and your VI SPDAT score could change, or it could, who knows the circumstances under which they originally took that screening test. So one of the first things we do is VI SPDAT them to make sure that they're the right fit for this. That was a great learning. We partner with Cook Inlet Housing and Widener and Path to Independence. And that a big challenge when we first got referrals was that we were getting all these referrals, so many, and spending time finding them, but then we'd find them and they were not at all the right eligibility for this kind of a program. So we're spending all this time, but we realized we have got to VI SPDAT them because it's changed. Because the experience of being homeless is traumatic. So by definition, that is your vulnerability could change wildly from when you first be assessed to a different time.
Lisa, can I just mention something real quick? You touched on the budget, 2.1 million, whatever it was, and how 80% is from just donations, the other 20% from other sources. But I think one thing to highlight too is those donations and that other really isn't paying for our entire budget. We actually have been operating in the red for a number of years, and that $400,000 that we just got from the city helped close that gap. So it was really critical for us. But something that we've been struggling with for the last couple of years is how do we close that gap? How do we close that budget gap? How do we operate even slimmer than we do now? We're finding donations in some cases there's less, just because of the financial situation of the state. People maybe aren't giving as much as they used to, although there's still a lot of very generous people out there who are getting significant donations. But we need to come up with a strategy to really close that gap, and the Assembly and the city's partnership this year was fantastic. If there are other ways we can partner, that would be great. Utility costs are going up, operational costs are going up. Of course, we'd like to, make the shelter smaller. That would be fantastic too. But there's still, the reality is there's a lot of need out there right now, and we're trying to. Dave and his staff and Lisa are trying to operate the shelter at a very high level with very bare bones finances.
Thanks, Mark. Because I think that's so important to understand too, in terms of in the past 5 years, we've stepped fully into being a low barrier shelter. So we're the lowest barrier shelter in the city, probably in the state, one of the lowest barrier in the state. And what that means is that we just try to have as few barriers or reasons that people can't come in as possible. So there's no expectation of employment. There's no expectation that you don't have to be sober, or as long as you can come in, you can't use drugs and alcohol here, you can't have a weapon, and you just don't hurt yourself or anybody else. And
so experiencing homelessness is our first requirement, our
thank
second
you. Yes.
requirement is that
you're not a danger to yourself or others currently. And then third is that you can provide your own self-care. So we don't have staff that are trained to be able to help someone change or take a shower or feed or anything like that. And even that, in the community right now is a challenge. You do have some of those people that present.
But we haven't always been that kind of a shelter. We stepped into that because the need was there in the community, and it's a big, big need. And with that came a need to staff at a safer level because we were not staffed at a level that we could support that kind of service. And with that has come a cost to provide shelter here that is more than we can really provide on an ongoing basis without partnership and investment and support.
Are you picking people to speak?
Oh,
Who's in
yes.
charge? Normally we have someone pointing at us or
Okay.
something.
I'm in charge. You.
So, you've got this. I travel to get snapshots. I went to Omaha and some of that there, and San Francisco and Portland. Just stopped in some places, got some ideas. And when I see there, in those places, they'll have kind of what you're doing here, but ramped up a bit.
Yep.
But they'll have the emergency shelter, they'll have the clinics and stuff like that, longer term shelter and so on, and more than what we offer here from all kinds of funding sources. And in Omaha, it was particularly impressive because it's about the same size situation. They said about the same number of homeless. Theirs are caused mostly by gambling, but they have two main campuses. And one is low barrier, and it has all kinds of stuff there. It has job placement, day shelter, emergency shelter, long-term, that VA thing, detox. And then another one is faith-based, but it was a higher barrier, which works because those people don't want to be with those people.
Oh,
they were far enough apart that they're different, but it wasn't, and it's not that huge of a city.
Yeah.
And so now we're kind of scraping the barrel to help you guys out now, but should the alcohol tax pass, now we have not enough money, but a significant amount more. So what do we do with it? Well, we kind of have some ideas, but do we put money into this to help you do more here? Do we build another shelter to lower your, because you're at 240, but your capacity should probably be less. Should that be a higher barrier? I mean, and then another thing, so those are big questions, maybe we don't have time now, but another thing is, should we do that? We're using tax money to do this. Will it hurt your fundraising? I'm not going to give them any more because I'm paying through my beer, so there can be a spillover there to anticipate.
Those are good questions. And I know in the work session that we're going to be having, we'll have some of our other partners there, and I think their voices are also really important to be heard on this. So I'll just start by saying that. I think when I think about it, that Brother Francis Shelter began as a public-private partnership and needs to be a public-private partnership. That doesn't mean I think that all of the funding from Shelter should go to this, but I think, in my opinion, the municipality, the government should help with those life and death services. And as the low barrier shelter in town, this is life and death right here. Every night especially this past few days or this past couple weeks, 240 people are not dying because they're here, literally. Not to be dramatic, but that's true. So I think that, in my opinion, there's government has a role in basic health and safety, and so that's the frame that I would start in looking at it. But I think the solution, the bigger solution you're talking about, do we need more shelter? I think so. Do we need more different kinds of shelter with different levels? Yes. It's really important that, Gospel Rescue Mission is an incredible resource in this community. We need to have a shelter like that. We need to have the Hope Center. I don't know if you guys knew that we helped the Hope Center to start. Hope Center, we helped them, and that was a journey. We helped them because before me, Susan Bomilowski saw the need for a shelter for women in this community, and she partnered with the Hope Center to create that and to set them up so that they could operate that and teach them about HMIS and things. I think that there needs to be a larger community solution, and we definitely want to be a part of those conversations. But I also think that ultimately the solution's housing.
Well, I think too, we do have two shelters.
Yes.
Catholic Social Services operates two, the Clare House and the Francis. And I think it'd be important to maybe highlight the numbers of the other shelters in town because it's not, 240 for us, but what is it on?
Gospel Rescue shoots at 100, and Hope Center takes 50. Clare House and Emergency Shelter we take about 60, I think, and then we have transitional housing for another about 40. And then Salvation Army's McKennel, they have 30, 20 to 30. It's not very big.
And with all of those shelters, they're all private, nonprofit companies that are operating. So normally in other cities, the government's taking care of those emergency services. And it's also important that while it's Catholic Social Services, there's a broad breadth of community that serves on the board. Because that public component isn't there, so we don't feel very passionately about.
Yeah, Meg and John, I think one thing in response to your question that the board is taking a very deep look at, and we're able to do this because we've become a statistically based driven organization, right? To be as efficient and strategic as we possibly can. But one of the things are the demographics. In the time that I've been involved with the programs here, I started 25 years ago here at Catholic Social Services too. The demographic has changed to where now the seniors are a huge percentage of our population, and they're more vulnerable, and they take up more medical services and every other kind of service that's involved. And also our Alaska Native population is higher than it used to be. And so this individuals with disabilities are higher. And the question, John, about mental health, the number of mental health issues are dramatically higher for us. So the whole character of how service is provided has dramatically changed, even just in the last 10 years. So, strategically looking at these different demographics and how they're best going to be served in a facility, right, it is very important for us as a board to try to analyze that strategically.
So we appropriated $735,000 for overnight shelter in the last budget, and I think we'll have the gap analysis in April that will kind of go to those demographics. But I guess I would encourage you all, I mean, partly that'll go through the health department to put out for whatever iteration, but if you have ideas about how we can get the highest and best use, out of taxpayer dollars, we were hoping it would, based on what we received from the administration, it would be $20 a night for 150 people for May to December, which covers the gap that we have in a year basis. So we didn't really get much public testimony about the highest and best use for those dollars. And I take the blame for that. It was an 11th hour idea. But I really would love to hear that feedback. They'll come to us to, make an appropriation. But if they have ideas and we start to have that dialogue, I mean, we should be having a conversation about what that looks like.
Yeah, thank you. I that makes me want to say too, because I just want to reiterate what Mark said and how grateful we are for the partnership with the funding this summer to stay at 240. I think lives were saved because of that, and we're really grateful that you saw that and in partnership with us really took that step forward. And we're also really grateful for the commitment to additional emergency shelter in the winter. And I know that it's hard, but I'll say that my predecessor made the case for additional emergency shelter and got $23,000 to operate with just a really slim staff and have more shelter available at Beans. And we stopped doing that because that was not enough money to operate that in the safe way, the way that we operate at Catholic Social Services. However, there's a huge need for that, and we appreciate the commitment and the partnership with Beans in doing that. And I think Beans does a really good job, and they are able to pull it up fast, and we appreciate the partnership with them. So thank you for that. And we'll think about, I don't know if you guys have thoughts on, we will, as an agency, think about ideas for the 750,000.
I think, though, it's important to note that we do not have emergency services for mental health crisis. We do not have emergency services for elders that need attentive care, that need 24-hour care. And there's a lot of them that are unable to age in place and do need care, and getting from a situation and home into assisted care is a very difficult process. And I've watched this firsthand just with three elders in my life, and it's an incredible strain on the family. People can't go to work because they need to take care of their elders, and there's no good process, and there's no good it's very complicated. But and then the other one is emergency services for treatment. Yeah, we are. I mean, if I had a problem and I wanted to get clean today, right now, I can't. I have to get put on a waiting list, and I have to wait until I have to call every single day and say I still want to get clean. And it's basically don't call us, we'll call you. And you just can't get in. And then there's a funding gap, and a lot of insurance, private insurance, are going to pay for that funding gap. So then once the possibilities of getting into some kind of treatment facility might be out there or in another state, then and then you find out that you have to pay for it too, and if there's no money, then they're usually not going to choose to try to stay for money.
Yeah. That's why every time that I testify about the tax to all of you, I always mention treatment, because there's so many people that we touch. So some are in shelter, but not all of them. Many of them are working, but they are in desperate need of access to treatment, and there's not enough treatment. So,
we're hearing what you want from us, and I think we have. My 4 years on Assembly, we're learning a lot about that and kind of know a lot of it, and there's just not enough resources. But our constraint is we do have a tax cap in Anchorage that is very constrictive. If we add $735,000 for you, we cut stuff for that. It's really, really hard. It's not just us deciding, heck, let's just tax more. We are not allowed to do that. So we got this alcohol tax on the ballot, and there's opposition, and you'll know it. And it's like, it's Seattle, they just throw money at it, and it's getting worse. We're going to become more Seattle. We need you to get the message out. It's critical. We're not just throwing money at it. We know what we're doing, and we just need the resources to do it. And just help promote that, because that's new money to do new stuff, and it's every single thing you mentioned here. That's why we're doing that, and that's. But the odds of that passing are very, very slim.
Right.
We need everybody to focus on that.
And quite frankly, I don't really know that mechanism. It needs to be broader, and then it needs to touch more people that can be supportive of paying some kind of a tax, and not necessarily because it's on alcohol. I think that maybe if you ask, there might be contingent that would say tax me on a healthy community, and broadly not based on properties, in some other capacity, people are saying tax me. I want to live here.
Yes.
But
we hear you, John,
yeah.
And we will.
50% plus one.
Right.
I hear you, and this is the first time that there's an income stream that is new, that could go to homeless services, and homeless services that currently the municipality does not contribute to really in any meaningful way. And it's something that's impacting every person in our community, and as a person in this community, I absolutely think that it's important. So we will think about how strongly.
How many more people do we need to convince compared to last year?
Well, it's 4654. So got a lot closer. The last time we tried to do sales tax, it failed 30 to 70, right? 40%. So alcohol tax got a lot closer. So I'm hopeful. And the alcohol tax passing doesn't preclude a broader conversation the following year about something else. This is going to be an ongoing conversation, because these these issues are not going away, unfortunately. So Jennifer, I think, has given us the hook here. It's time to go.
Yeah, so I have to get this simply back for another
Work session. Any closing comments or questions? Lisa, do you have any closing thoughts?
I will. I was just going to say again, thank you. Thank you for coming down, and thank you for focusing on homelessness and extreme poverty. These are issues that impact all of us. We appreciate your partnership, and we ask for continued partnership and transparency and working together. And we will also try to have as much transparency in working with you as possible, because we know that the community needs to address this together, and only together will a true solution come. Mark,
No, I echo that completely, and thanks to each of you for taking time out of your day to come learn about Brother Francis Shelter. And I always learn something new when I go on a tour with David. And I'm just always amazed at the work we're doing with the resources we have. But again, thank you for your partnership.
call us anytime.